Hey gardeners, I am Brandon, this is April.
Hi.
And we are with Botanical Interests. Today we are planting garlic. How should you choose garlic?
Garlic falls into two main categories, hardneck and softneck. Hardneck garlic is more closely related to wild garlics. It has more complex flavors, but it also requires a cold period for bulb production. That's known as vernalization. It also has larger cloves, a slightly shorter storage period, from 4 to 6 months on average. They're easier to peel. Hardneck garlic also develops an edible flower stalk called a scape. The scape should be harvested to allow energy to go into creating a larger bulb. Southern gardeners can grow hardneck garlic as well if they put bulbs through a cold treatment before planting. We have specific instructions about that on the website. Softneck garlic is more what you see in the grocery store. It's adapted to grow in any climate and doesn't need that cold period to bulb up. It has a milder flavor, and because it has a soft neck, it can be braided. It also has a longer storage period of up to 9 months and has more but somewhat smaller cloves.
When should garlic be planted?
Garlic should be planted 4 to 6 weeks before your first hard freeze. In most places, this is mid-September to mid-November, but in warmer winter climates, you can plant until January.
April, what are your best tips for garlic planting?
Garlic's a heavy feeder, and it likes good drainage, so you're going to want to amend your soil with compost and create a nice, fluffy, weed-free planting bed. Keep bulbs intact until you're ready to plant. Then break apart bulbs, leaving the protective skins on the cloves. Plant the cloves wide end down, 4 inches deep, in your well-amended soil. Cover with soil, then water. You can mulch your planting with leaves or straw. Plan to pull away the mulch as temperatures warm up in the spring.
Okay, so April, how do we know when these are ready to be harvested?
Garlic's ready to be harvested when 1/3 to 1/2 of the leaves have browned and dried. And at that point, when you start seeing the leaves dry, you want to cut back water.
Okay, so it looks like this one right here is ready.
You're right.
Okay, so what kind of tools do we need to do this?
You're going to want a pair of sturdy gloves and a digging fork, which is different than a pitchfork.
Oh, it's not a pitchfork.
A digging fork has flat tines and they won't bend when you dig them into the soil.
Ah, that's right here. Okay, so where do you put the digging fork initially?
Well, you don't want to put it too close to the plant because you could pierce the bulb. So I kind of back it up maybe 4 inches or so. Okay. And the trick is you want to put the fork in pretty straight. So you're, again, trying to avoid piercing those bulbs that are under there about 4 inches. Okay. So I try to put it in straight. And then we gently lift up the bulbs.
Oh, look at that.
And there we go.
They look great.
Now you can kind of knock the major parts of the soil off while we're here in the garden. But the big cleaning doesn't come until after they're cured.
Okay, so once you've pulled it out of the soil, what do you have to do to the bulb?
You don't want to damage the skin because that's protecting it for long-term storage. So we just knock the dirt off of the roots, keep the roots intact, keep the skin intact, and now we'll hang it for 3 to 5 weeks to let it cure. And while it cures, the flavor intensifies, and we just sit and wait to enjoy our garlic after it's done.
Ooh, that's kind of making me hungry right now, thinking about that. Now that we have cleaned it, what's the next step?
Well, now we prep it for the curing process. So we hang it. I hang mine in the garage. You don't want a place that's too hot or definitely not near freezing. And you can hang them in bundles of up to 20. I use a simple slip knot here, so as the garlic dries and gets smaller, it'll continue to tighten as it hangs. You hang it in that space with good ventilation with up to 20 bulbs for 3 to 5 weeks, and then you'll note that the leaves and the stems will become crackly and very dry, and that's when it's done.
That's great.
Ready to eat.
Yeah, and I guess you have to make sure that you label it if you have several different varieties growing so that you remember.
Good point, Brandon. You do want to label it. Right. And I would say that this is a good opportunity to look over all the bulbs, make sure that there's no damage, that you don't see any mold, because of course you wouldn't want to include those in the bunch because they could infect the others. Okay, our garlic's been sitting for 3 to 5 weeks. It's dry and cured. The leaves are papery, crunchy, and when you cut it, you'll see there's no green on the inside anymore. So it's ready to be eaten. So we do our final cleanup, which means cut it from the stem. You can see I still leave about 1.5 inches or so on top. And then I also cut off the roots, leaving about 1/4 inch from the bulb. You definitely don't want to cut into the bulb, as it can leave it open for infection. And there's some dirt on the outside. We just take off 1 layer of the skin, because the more skin it has, the longer it'll store. And voila! Better than grocery store.
Remember this study, in which garlic won out as the #1 anti-cancer vegetable? Well, let's see what it can do. This is what's called a COMET assay, currently the standard technique for the evaluation of DNA damage. What you're looking at is the DNA of a single cell, a normal human breast cell, as visualized under a fluorescence microscope. It's in an electric field trying to pull the negative charged DNA to the right, but our DNA is normally supercoiled tightly together. But you add a carcinogen, like in this case the cooked meat chemical FIP, that literally breaks up our DNA, you can see the chopped pieces of DNA breaking away and flowing out in kind of like the tail of a comet, which is why they call it the comet tail test. The larger the tail, the more DNA has been broken off into pieces. But if you repeat the experiment, and this time, what if you add the same amount of carcinogen, but also add in some garlic phytonutrients at the same time? You get some damage, some DNA breakage, but not as much as before. Which kind of garlic would be expected to work the best, garlic or elephant garlic, the so-called garlic for people who don't like garlic? And the answer appears to be garlic. Garlic is best. What about flavonoid phytonutrients found in fruits, vegetables, nuts, and grains? Here are the top 100 sources in the world. Do they have a protective effect on the meat mutagen-induced DNA damage? They took white blood cells from healthy individuals and colon cancer patients and exposed them to increasing doses of 2 cooked meat carcinogens, IQ, found mostly in fried bacon and baked fish, and FIP, found mostly in fried bacon, fish, and chicken. They used the COMET assay again, measuring how much DNA was broken off in the tail, and as you can see, as the concentration of meat mutagens increases, so does the DNA damage. They then continued to pump in that meat mutagen at the highest level, but started adding some plant phytonutrients. Quercetin, found in foods like apples, red onions, and berries, and rutin, found in like citrus, buckwheat, and asparagus. Even as the highest carcinogen dose continues, adding plant phytonutrients starts to bring the damage down. That happened in both healthy individuals, the solid line, and cancer patients, the dashed line. But I want you to notice something else. Even at a 0 concentration of cooked meat chemicals, there was more DNA damage present in the white blood cells circulating in cancer patients. And they didn't have blood cancer, they had colon cancer. Even though the cancer was just in their colon, their whole body was affected by the disease state. Their whole body was under increased oxidative stress, inflicting significantly higher DNA damage. Or maybe the DNA damage came first, and is one of the reasons they have cancer in the first place. Either way, cancer patients experienced less reduction of induced DNA damage, suggesting that higher concentrations of flavonoid would be required to achieve the same protective effect. So cancer and other chronic disease victims need even more fruits and vegetables to reduce the damage done by carcinogens.